You should know your income. That is what a lot of the online world really focuses on, is like, what do you want your income levels to be? What do you want your income levels to be? It's your bottom line that is more important. If your expenses are bigger than your income, then what is that goal giving you? And I think that's a beautiful first step, knowing what your costs are, because that's when you can really start planning for your income. If doing your books and maintaining that is too big of a step right now, the absolute easiest step, get a business bank account and only use that.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Walk to Wealth podcast. If you're tuning in on YouTube or any of the podcast directories, make sure to do yourself a favor and to give us a follow, because I don't want you to miss out on any of the amazing guests I got coming on this year. We haven't missed yet, and we don't plan on missing anytime soon. So we're going to get right into this one. Audrey, for anyone who hasn't had the opportunity yet to get to meet you, tell us about yourself. Who are you and what do you do?
Yes, thank you. My name is Audrey Heesh. I run a bookkeeping company, and I also have an interim CFO company, and just getting in and helping small business owners really understand their finances and what it all means and how it all comes together.
That's amazing. And so before we start talking about the money talk today, let's hop back in this time machine, as I like to say, and take us back to little Audrey. What was it like growing up? Was this like something you always had in mind? Like, how did this all come about? What was it like growing up back in your childhood?
Oh, goodness. I was raised by a single mom, young single mom. And so there was a lot of scarcity and a lot of lack. In some ways, it was definitely hyper-focused on. So the money shame is something that has carried with me, and my family is not good with money. They always say I'm an alien because I came out of nowhere being very, very strategic and very planned with money. I remember in middle school, this is how much of a weird nerd I am. You know those lamps that had little drawers? There's like little like the base is like drawers.
No.
Fair.
I'll say yes for the purpose of the podcast.
So, thank you. There's 4 little drawers instead of like the pull up. And each one of those drawers, I had different things. I was like, okay, this is for college, this is for my car, and this is for spending. And I'm in middle school. So this is not exactly prime time for people to be budgeting. And here I was budgeting. My senior year in high school, I don't know if this is all over the country, but we had a senior project. You had to do your senior project before you graduated. And my senior project was on the pitfalls of credit cards, like how people my age didn't understand credit cards and what they meant and how it transacted into their lives. It was seen as free money. And I was like, this is not how it works. And so that's what I did my senior project on. And so I've always just been fascinated with money, and I love managing it and figuring it out and eliminating the shame, because when there's shame, you ignore it. And I saw that firsthand in my family. And so I was like, I'm going to break that mold. Here we go. Yeah.
And so take us a little bit more further down the journey. So after you did your high school project, right, you're talking about money and credit cards. And that's around the time where I took my first entrepreneurship class in like sophomore year. I was still never really focused on money though. So I took the class. Only thing I remember honestly is watching Shark Tank every Friday. That's about it. And then I had a personal finance class for half a semester that I took in high school. But besides that, I really wasn't money smart at all. And it didn't happen for me until I got into college and I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and that would spark everything. So after you graduated high school, where does your journey take you from there?
That has been a wild journey. So I graduated in 2007. So that was right before the big dip and the big craziness with finances. And so I was still going to school. I was on the accounting track. The accounting track is and my industry as a whole, it's very black and white. I'm not a black and white human. I'm very colorful, and here we go. And so I switched over to finance, thinking that was my path, but it turned out not to also be my path, but that's what I got graduated with. The restaurant I was working at, the CFO was like, when you graduate, come talk to me. And so I got in doing the books for the restaurant, and just it slowly evolved to more and more business. It's been like, okay, can you help me with this? Can you help me with this? And I ended up moving to Oregon, and this is where I'm just taking off. And I was working at a place where it was just, I came in and I put together like 3 or 4 years of books with mingling funds, everything everywhere, and put it all together. And then after that, the accounting firm was like, what are you doing now? And so I got a job at the accounting firm. And from there, I took off to my bookkeeping business. And now I'm on to my next step to be an interim CFO.
That's amazing. So let me ask you, because it's one of those things when it comes to becoming an entrepreneur, when you're, in corporate, I feel is a lot harder than when you become an entrepreneur, like either fresh out of high school or while you're in high school, while you're in college, before you get the golden handcuffs, because it's like you have something solid. As being in the accounting space or finance space, you're usually getting paid more than like a social worker or something like that. So like it can start off making a lot more money than some of the other professions. You have normally at these companies some better benefits, and you started your business despite already having something that was pretty secure. What was it like navigating starting your business and doing the independent like bookkeeping thing at that time where you were like starting it off? What was it like back then?
That is one of the fun curves in my story. I always said I did not want to be an entrepreneur. I was like, no, hard pass. Because being in the accounting firm and just everything I'd seen up to there, and I saw the worst of the worst. Like, I know how bad entrepreneurship can be. And I was like, nope, not doing that. But after I left the accounting firm, because it was just like, after the accounting firm, I was like, okay, I need to do 180. I went into the construction world because I was like, nope, done with this, over here. My clients found really creative ways to find me. Like, they tracked down my now husband at work to be like, can I have her number? And so that was very flattering. So I had like 3 or 4 clients in the bag before I started. And it was like, okay, I can work my normal 50 hours plus additional to help my clients because I really wanted to make sure they were taken care of. And so I just leaned into it, even though I didn't want to. And it was like, I don't want to do this. But I was like, it's time, it's necessary, and it's what everything has been calling me to do. So instead of fighting it like I had been for years, and I could have been much more established by then, I finally leaned into it and took the leap.
Let me ask you, because you bring up a pretty interesting point. So you said like I should have been, and should implies a lot of judgment, right? It implies that something had to have been done already, right? And so a lot of the times when we get into something and we realize that we had the opportunity to start it sooner, we beat ourselves up about it. How did you not get in that negative trap of just like, oh my goodness, I could have done this better sooner and I could have been so much more successful, and being more in the mindset of like gratitude and being just grateful for where you are and finally starting? A lot of people tend to like always get caught up in the entrepreneur and the business and stuff like that and never get caught up in the gratitude. And so how did you not get caught up in the like, beating yourself up because you should have done this X amount of time ago? That
is a beautiful insight and a beautiful perspective. My mom was I've always been headstrong. Like, when I decide to do something, it's what I choose in that moment, where I'm going. My biggest thing is I live life to the fullest, to my satisfaction, not yours. And so that was my moment. I was like, okay, this is when I'm doing it. So this is now where my mindset is going, if that makes sense. Like, I was just like, nope, this is my path. Now I'm going to go here. Yeah, I could have all the should-haves, and clearly I said some of it. So some of it's still lingering that I need to work through. But for the most part, it's releasing myself from that mental trap. Like you said, like, where's the gain in that? What do you get from focusing your energy, your time, your mental capacity on that when you could be focusing on your future and where you're going? It's
one of those things where disappointment comes from unmet expectations. And a lot of our expectations are unrealistic. And then we question why they were unmet. And so many times it's like people find themselves so disappointed. And it's like, you're at the right place at the right time with all the stuff going on. You're where you need to be for this current season of your life and for that current moment that you're in. And I always talk about, like, I don't really talk about it on a podcast as much as I probably should, but when I am talking to people, it's like, let go of things you can't control. Right? And that's one of those things it's like you can't control. And another thing is, everyone always assumes that if you change one variable in the past, that it spirals into success. And when in reality, anyone who watched like a time traveler movie should know that you touch one thing in the past and like you could have so many different scenarios, none of which are what you originally planned for. It's like you don't know how things would have turned out. And so many people just beat themselves up and they're stuck living in the past. And it's like, man, just you have to be grateful for where you are now and get through it. So you started your bookkeeping business on the side. Now you're an interim CFO. Like, what's it like now, to bring us back full circle before we really dive into today's conversation? What's it like now? I know you last time we spoke, you had some exciting things planned. Like, what's it like now with the business world, with your business, with this new position that you're getting into?
Yes, lots of exciting things. So so in July 17th through the 25th, I believe, I'm putting on another summit. So that is going to be amazing and incredible, and just spilling the tea on gaining control of your business's finances, because I know that's a sticking point with entrepreneurs. And I am just on a mission to empower small business owners and with their finances, and just get them what they need, where they're at, and uplift them.
And that is amazing. I was just teaching a class right before we hopped on to record this. So I have a marketing company, and I'm actually getting ready to launch my first course literally next week from the time of recording this. So I'm doing I don't know if you know Jeff Walker, but he has a book called Launch. And if you have a good, a product, whether digital or in person or service or whatever, coaching, or his book would be an amazing read for you. He talks pretty much about, he's like the OG of launches. So most of the people that launch their business were probably students of his. All the big time entrepreneurs pretty much learn from him. And essentially what he talks about is you teach 3 pieces of content. I'm doing live video. So I'm going live workshop style, but you teach 3, and then on the 4th one, you pitch whatever it is. So whether it's your coaching, or if you have a high ticket mastermind, or if you have a course, I'm launching a course. So day 4, I'm going to pitch my course. And then you have an open cart for a week, meaning that it's available for a week for anyone that doesn't know what open cart means and the audience. And then on Friday that week, I'm going to close the cart. And then after that, whoever gets in, whoever doesn't. So I don't even know where I was going on this tangent. Long story short, I completely forgot the point. So we're just going to keep it going. So now you have this summit that you're working on. You have this summit that you're working on. Long story short is read Launch. It's a great book that for anyone that wants to launch their business, for any entrepreneurs in the audience, or for you as well, Audrey. It's that book is an amazing read. And so to kind of segue into this stuff, so most of the people, my audience, is either trying to get into starting a business or just started it. And most people in this age group that I'm in, 18 to 21 to 22, most people in general don't know about money. But my age group definitely doesn't know about money. And a lot of them aren't interested in how the game actually works. And I always say there's 2 games. There's one for the informed and there's one for the uninformed. And it's one of those things where it's I'm on a mission to help inform people, because it's what's that? Then you can actually play. And so let's talk about it. Accounting, money for small business, money management in general. How does one start? Where does one start when it comes to starting their business? How does one begin to properly manage or bookkeep their small business? Because for me right now, to be transparent, I don't have a bookkeeper at all or anything like that. So I'm I have a business card and a business bank account. I'm somewhat organized in that front, but I don't have a bookkeeper or anything like that, keeping track or anything. So Kajabi keeps track of how much I made, which isn't really much at all. But after this launch, it might be a different story. So where does one start? Long story short.
That's amazing. You did an amazing first step by getting a bank account that is strictly for business. And that is absolutely step 1, which generally means you need to register your business with both the federal and the state. So you get an EIN from the federal, and then in Oregon, we call it a BIN. I'm not sure. Yeah. It's all over. And get that business bank account and keep it separate. That is one of the biggest things that I see, is the mingling of funds between personal and business. The next step would be tracking. And if you do take something on your personal card, track that. Either have a spreadsheet or have your book set up to accommodate that. transaction if you're used to using your personal and you're not ready to transfer it over. So
yeah, really quickly, define book setup. What does that look like for someone who doesn't even understand? They just got into business because they wanted to get some side money or started, people told them they should start doing here or something. What does it mean by you have your books set up? What does that mean?
Excellent question. So your books are your finances, just your in paper form or digital form. Every transaction that goes into your business and for your business is tracked, and it's called your books. You'll have like all your bank accounts, all your assets, anything you owe, and then all your expenses. And you just put it into, it can be a spreadsheet, it can be a software system, and you just track it and it shows you the flow and you get reports. And that's when the money happens. That's when you can really start playing with it. Like you said, that's when you get the power because you have all this data and it's your data and you get to use that data because you have it available to you to grow and learn.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you set up your bank accounts, right? And then you start getting your books set up properly. Where do we go from there?
Maintenance. So once you have it all set up, then since your business is always having transactions, your books should reflect that. So you get a sale, then the sale gets entered. You pay a bill, that bill gets entered. And so the flow of money and the energy of money gets into your books, and that's what it shows. And once you have that and you have it all put together, you can then look at your reports and be like, okay, I know every September is my dip month for whatever reason. Either that's my break in launches or that's just the cyclical cycle of my industry. You can then prepare for that. You can be like, okay, well, June is my high month, so the income here can carry me over here for my expenses that I might be missing. You can then start looking at your numbers and learning your numbers and making plans to see what is the downfall and the peaks and play with that.
Yeah, so pretty much to simplify everything, first you separate, right? And then you track, and then you maintain, essentially. So I want to go back to the first one, separate. For anyone that doesn't understand why really, you told us kind of why, but what would happen if we didn't? What are some of the repercussions that could happen or the bad stuff that can happen if, it hits the fan and we're caught, with our pants down? It's what could happen if, we're not set up properly? Because sometimes people understand, it's I don't need a business account, right? Or I could just use my personal and just say, separating. What would happen if you didn't have that set up properly and you ended up, something bad were to happen?
That is an incredible question because currently my newest client, she hired me to put her books together because it hadn't been. What she did is she would just tally up her expenses every time she decided to pay her taxes. And it wasn't always every year like it should have been. She was going through big life changes. So it was just the compilation and she just didn't have it. And now she's getting audited. So we're currently in an audit.
Big word.
And it is that mixture of personal and business. And the auditor is getting into it because they have full liberty to do that. That is their job, is to make sure that what you're self-reporting matches what your reality is. And so we're digging through a bunch of receipts, a bunch of bank statements of personal and business and trying to get it all together. And my biggest takeaway is that it may seem like a pain in the ass right now to set it up and get it going and maybe expensive, but doing it when it's too late, I can guarantee you is 10 times more expensive.
So let me ask you a quick question. So you don't have to share her numbers because of course that's your client, but for someone who's a small business owner, like a solopreneur, what's the biggest, tax or payment that someone would have to pay from being audited that you've known or you've heard of?
I don't have excellent question. I don't know. The audit, I haven't really heard of the end bill. I guess that's not. That is.
So what happens? So that may be something that I don't know. So I'm familiar with the term audit. I know what it is. I know what happens. So, but let's say you get audited and your books aren't in check. What happens there? I guess it would be a better question then, because what happens if you get audited and it's oh, so you actually weren't properly reporting? What happens there?
Perfect. So what the auditor does, they for whatever reason, your account either gets flagged or put into an audit pool just by unluck. And then you get a letter in the mail and it just outlines what they're wanting documentations for. They can ask for every single line on your return, or they can be like, okay, I want these categories. Everything else seems reasonable and I'm not going to waste my time on that, basically. So they just take the line items that they have questions on and you present documents for. Before you present that document, they send you a list of, okay, if you don't give us any of these documents, this is what your bill is going to be because we're going to disallow it. So you filed your tax return being like, okay, I want these allowable deductions, but if you don't give proof, they're going to take them away. And so it just breaks it out to be like, okay, this is how much additional tax you're going to pay. These are the penalties applied if all of these don't get documented. And this is the interest compiled on up to that. So my client is currently with that, it's $500,000.
My goodness.
Yes.
Shit.
So it's a lot of work. It is a lot of documents because just the sales are really high. And so the expenses are really high. And so it's just walking through that and getting it organized and valid to present to the IRS auditor. So if we can't present something, but we can present half of it. So let's say we can present like 50% of it, but not the other 50%, then she'll only have to pay penalties and fees on what couldn't be presented.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot more sense. I didn't know that's how it worked. And for any business owners, it's like your worst nightmare. Like the IRS is like the big, bad, mean guys. They're just trying to take all your money. So let me ask you, right? So now that we kind of understand why it's important and what could happen if we don't manage our stuff properly, how can we make tracking simpler? How can we make it so someone that's even just newer, just getting started, and they probably got a business going a little bit, how can we make it simple and easy for them to understand so they don't just try to overlook it because it's too much work, right? Especially for someone that kind of has it going already and is a solopreneur. It's like, I don't got time for that. I'm doing my business, I'm working with my clients, whatever it may be. It's like, how can we make tracking easier for people so that they can manage their money properly?
If doing your books and maintaining that is too big of a step right now, the absolute easiest step ever is, like you said at the beginning, get a business bank account and only use that. So that way, all of your expenses will be in one spot. It's already tracked. Just when you get to putting your books together, it won't be a big project because it'll all be in one spot. You won't be looking at this credit card and this one and this one and this one and this one. You'll have it in one spot. And same with receipts. Just then keep it in one spot. Keep one file folder with receipts. Keep one in your inbox for when you get digital receipts. And just that can be a simple way to get started.
Yeah, that's definitely a great thing. One of the things I did to make it easier for me, I got a business credit card. And for me, that makes it super simple. And another quick little savvy trick, business credit cards don't report to your personal credit report. And if you know how to leverage business credit cards right, you can actually have a lot more wiggle room and playroom to get your business off the ground without having to go into crazy debt. And some of them have like 12 months, 0 APR. So if you have to kind of like fund yourself, as I said, make sure you can pay it off. Be smart with your money. Be smart because credit cards, as you mentioned, is not free money. But it's like, if you need a credit card to get started to fund yourself, let's say you want to start a clothing business, you want to start up your own clothing line. Clothes aren't going to pay for themselves, especially if you don't have any clients. You don't have, so that's when where you can kind of almost seed fund yourself so that you can get your business going off the ground. And I definitely would recommend getting a business credit card because it's one of those things where it's like, one, it makes reporting so much easier. It's like, all right, I don't know how much I spend, but I know I only use this card for everything. So just boom, just look at my docs, my bank statements for this credit card, and it'll make everything easier. And that way you don't have to, as I said, scramble around to keep yourself organized. But let me ask you a question. Is there any software tool? I want to ask you about QuickBooks, especially because I'm thinking about potentially using it in the future. Like, what's your thoughts on QuickBooks? Right now, I have a business bank account right now and a business credit card for my marketing company. And I'm looking to grow that. And I'm finally starting to make some money with this entrepreneurship thing. Right? So it's like, am I okay with that for the meantime? Or like, do I invest in QuickBooks? When would someone need that? When would someone need QuickBooks or need to invest in that if they already have a bank account, and would it be worthwhile doing so?
That is a tricky question because every situation is going to be very different. So this advice is going to be very vague because I don't want to steer somebody wrong and be like, but this lady you've told me like.
So let me rephrase the question. What are some pros and cons about QuickNotes? Right. So don't give especially just general pros and cons about QuickNotes. I haven't talked about QuickNotes at all in my podcast. So unless someone's already familiar, most of the people here probably haven't heard of it. So like QuickBooks, what is it? Why would someone use it? Why shouldn't someone use it? Generally speaking.
QuickBooks is the accounting software giant in the field. They have been around the longest, so their software is the best. Everything that you need is pretty much in QuickBooks. If you need to, it's great because you can start as a beginner, and then it goes to fairly advanced. You can add a lot of features, and as you grow and you're like, okay, I want to know this, or how do I get this out of my data? The software allows you to find that and figure that out easier than any other software I've seen that wasn't like a customized accounting software to the company. It's easy, it's simple to use. It doesn't use a lot of big, scary words that some of the other accounting softwares have. They use it in more relatable verbiage. And so that's helpful. It's online, so you can easily get into it and out of it. Has multiple users. The downside is it's really expensive. And so that can be a deterrent. Absolutely. It's also, as a company, I have personal issues with their ethics, but that's probably another conversation for another day, but yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. So the reason I wanted to ask you, because when I think of like bookkeeping, that's what comes to mind, the QuickBooks. And I know a lot of people probably seen their ads. And so I wanted to make sure to ask it. And so let me ask you then, at what point would someone go to someone like you? And like, do people go to you for like only the bad stuff, or like do people go to you for like regular book? Like when does someone go to like an actual like person bookkeeper versus like an online software? What's the differences there?
I tend to attract the ones that are that are the mess, and it's because it's fun for me, and so I'm very open about it, and I don't allow the shame to come through, because when there is those big issues, there's a lot of shame, because a lot of people feel like, a lot of entrepreneurs are like, I should have done this. Yes. Should have known better, should have done better. A lot of those should. And so I eliminate that. It's like, well, this is where we're at. Let's get into it. Let's have fun. I love my paperwork. I love my receipts. So I'm here for it. And so that makes them feel, I get told that makes them feel better. So the ones that take off, like the ones that tend to be the most stable, reach out to a bookkeeper when they realize they're not maintaining it themselves and they're ready to take the entrepreneur lane seriously and start to get this taken care of. And that's the beauty of finances. You don't have to be the one doing the in and out day to day. That's why there's nerdy people like me. But you do have to know your numbers. And I think that is the teeter-totter that people don't fully embrace, is that they think that they have to be the one doing it. And it's always the last thing. It's the first thing that gets put off, doing their books, first thing that gets put off in admin tasks. And it's the last thing to get outsourced. But it's such a key pivotal part of your business. Your finances are your foundation. So it's important to take it seriously.
It's one of those things, like in Rich Dad Poor Dad, it talks about the cash flow quadrant. And then it's like employee, self-employed, business owner, and then investor. And a lot of people are self-employed, meaning they work for a job. The job just happens to be, they're the boss of that job. And a lot of people get into entrepreneurship just to work a job where they're the boss, instead of getting into entrepreneurship to start a business. And so one of the key differentiating factors that I've learned from talking to so many people and attending conferences is like knowing the importance of knowing your numbers. So for anyone who really doesn't understand this and is still new to this bookkeeping thing, like what numbers should they look at? There's a lot of numbers. There's income, there's expenses, there, and you start getting very technical and start throwing in, cost per acquisition and all these technical. I'm just now starting to learn about some of those terms and stuff like that. But it's like, what numbers specifically when it comes to like at least the bookkeeping side of things should people look into so that they can have a pulse on their business and how it's doing?
Love this question. So this is a fantastic question. There are, yes, absolutely. You should know your income. That is what a lot of the online world really focuses on, is like, what do you want your income levels to be? What do you want your income levels to be? And while that is very important, It's your bottom line that is more important. Because if your expenses are bigger than your income, then what is that goal giving you? If your goal is $10,000 a month, but your expenses are $9,500, is that really what you're aiming for? And so really knowing what your costs are. What is your break-even point? Which means how much money do you have to bring in every month to break even for your just basic costs? And that's when you start to dig into that, that's when it's like, oh, I get it. That's when I see people be like, oh, okay, I can figure that out and I can get a grasp on that. And I think that's a beautiful first step, is just knowing what your costs are, because that's when you can really start planning for your income. But you should be focusing on your profit.
Yeah, that's another thing that a lot of the online gurus and stuff preach. It's like, oh, make 6 figures a year and doing XYZ. And they just share with you the revenue, and they don't give you all the bells and whistles as to what's actually going on behind the scenes. Like, for example, you mentioned earlier that you talked about a restaurant, and I know from working in restaurants still, it's like money is extremely tight when it comes to restaurants. At least most of them, the margin is like super tight. So it's like a lot of them was like, they're making a lot of money, but it's like, there's so much expenses that goes into running a restaurant. It's literally insane. So a lot of these people have businesses and they're sharing their information. It's like, oh, I make XYZ. And it's like, okay, how much do you keep of XYZ? And a lot of people, if we got to peel back the onion or unveil the curtains, it's like you will see a lot of people aren't really making as much as it seems. And a lot of people are burning more money than they're actually making. And so let me ask you, for when it comes to keeping a pulse on your business, now that we start looking at a number at income expenses, from there, what are some other important things to look out for? Because I feel like expenses, it's great, you have to pay for Riverside, the platform, right? We're using, I pay like $20 a month or this, and then I have my editing platform, right? But a lot of the time it's the unexpected things that pretty much screw us over. How do we, make room for that, so that, let's say there's a conference that's coming up and I want to go to it, I could actually attend so I can continue growing my business? Like, what are some of the things that are unexpected that people usually get caught up on?
Well, there's a global pandemic, which was really difficult. It varies so widely, and I feel like there's a lot of fear in that, which is why people start to ignore their finances, is because they're like, oh, but I can't plan for everything, and so I shouldn't try. And that's where a budget comes in, is you can be like, okay, here's what we have. And if something unexpected comes up, you have your numbers in front of you to be like, okay, this can be moved, this can be shaved, this can be this can, and I can make it great. Or if it's something very, very important and you need to, okay, I know exactly where my finances are at, so I can get a loan, or I can put this on the credit card, or whatever. I get an investor because I know how important this is. Once you have your numbers and your finances together, you can make those power moves based on the situation at hand, because you have all the data available to you. You know exactly your position.
And that's amazing advice. And so, Audrey, we talked about a lot today. We talked about, managing your pretty much, what was it? It's separate, then it's track, then it's maintain in the beginning. And then we talked a little bit into what to look for, the numbers and things like that. So we got tons of actionable advice that people can start looking into to getting. So make sure that they got their tails covered, and they don't hopefully ever end up in a situation where, we get audited and we have a business and we tried so hard to get our business off the ground, and now we have this giant bill that we go because we ain't do things properly. So where can we find you at? Where can we connect with you? Where can we find out about your summit that you mentioned earlier, so that we can stay in the loop of your world and make sure we have our money right?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram, Graceful Penny. My website is www.thegracefulpenny.com. The summit hasn't been quite up yet, but it's going to be Get Off the Money Shame Train. And so that's where you can sign up for that. I don't know when this is going to air, so it might be up.
I have it air before the summit. I have it up before the summit.
Okay. So then it should be up. So www.getoffthemoneyshametrain.com.
Alrighty. And so now it's time for our famous 5 questions. So question number 1, we're going to come off swinging heavy. What is the most impactful lesson you've learned in life?
Most impactful would be to step through the fear. When you step through the fear, that's when the magic happens.
What is the most admirable trait a person can have?
Authenticity and ethics, morals.
If you had to change someone's life with one book, which book would you recommend?
Anything Brene Brown. What is it? Atlas of the Heart? Yeah, Atlas of the Heart.
What is the legacy that you're trying to leave behind?
That your numbers don't have to be scary.
And for anyone that wants to embark on their walk to wealth today, what is the first step you recommend they take?
Whatever that looks like for them. So that's not a very good answer. Just take that step. Walk through the fear. What is it you're most scared of? What is holding you back from what is pulling you to do? And step through it. Find out what you need to support you to get to that next step because it's calling you for a reason. Get it. Take that step. Walk through that fear.
Amazing, Audrey. Well, thanks again for hopping on. Thanks again for dropping all the gems that you did. And, I'm super excited to see where you go and how your summit goes. I'll definitely be attending myself. So super excited for everything. And thanks again for hopping on.
Thanks, John.